following preview was begrudgingly approved for all audiences.
You're listening to Elevator Music.
Welcome back to Forward Thinking, presented by the Professional Collegiate League. I'm Ricky Vellante, and I'll be joined by my co-host, David West. As usual, we'll be talking to guests challenging the status quo, doing social good, and bringing about positive change to the world, while also talking a little bit of sports. In this episode, we have two special guests. First, we'll be joined by Chief Development Officer and co-founder of the PCL, Keith Sparks. He'll be talking about his time in Stanford's athletic department and also the mentoring that he's been doing for elite college athletes since, as well as what athletes are currently experiencing on college campuses during the pandemic. Then we'll be joined by writer of Black-ish and co-creator of Mixed-ish, Peter Saji. Saji will be talking about his time in Hollywood from Cavemen to Cougar Town to Black-ish and Mixed-ish. We'll also discuss how Hollywood's adjusting in the midst of the pandemic. If you haven't already, be sure to like and subscribe Forward Thinking on your favorite podcast platform and the PCL YouTube channel. You can also get more information at thepcleague.com/forwardthinking. We hope you enjoy the episode. And welcome back to Forward Thinking. Ricky Vellante, joined by my co-host David West. We have yet another special guest joining us today, one of our co-founders and the Chief Development Officer of the PCL, Keith Sparks. Keith, thank you for joining us today.
You're still calling me Chief Development Officer, I see. I'm waiting to graduate to advisor. Maybe one day.
Board executive.
Thanks for having me, man. Yeah.
So Keith, you've been involved in college athletics for quite some time, though some may not know that. If you don't mind going a little bit into your experiences at Stanford and in general how you've worked with college athletes over the last few decades.
Sure. Way back in the day, in 1988, I worked at Stanford University. Worked there for 6 years, from 1988 to 1994, and served as the principal liaison between the admissions department at Stanford and the athletic department. So in that role, I would advise the coaches on who had the best chances of getting in, and then I would also lobby on behalf of prospective students or athletes to be admitted into school. During my tenure there, I worked with a lot of well-known figures: Denny Green, Tyrone Willingham, Brian Billick, Ron Turner, all from the coaching fame, Bill Walsh. Then worked with a lot of football players: John Lynch, Bob Whitfield. Baseball players: Jeffrey Hammonds, Mike Mussina. Formed relationships and tried to serve as a mentor for those guys while I was there. Also worked with a lot of tennis athletes, swimming athletes, that Pablo Morales and Janet Evans, just a bunch of well-known folks that were participating in the highest level of athletics. So it could be professional sports, or it could be Olympic sports as well. So while I was there, I became disillusioned with the college sports model, and everybody knows that Stanford is held up as the preeminent program in the nation in terms of college sports and doing it right, quote unquote. And they do a good job of that. But I became frustrated with a lot of what I call the country club level sports that were at Stanford that were effectively being subsidized by the two primary revenue sports, which is football, Division I football, and men's basketball. And the demographics underneath that are not very pretty, quite frankly. These families are largely, come from backgrounds, African-American background. But more than that, there are class issues as well, just not very wealthy families or wealthy kids, coming to Stanford and effectively subsidizing these sports where the demographics are much more affluent. So that just left a sour taste in my mouth, as I continued to work at Stanford through 1994. Then after I had left, I went into a career in energy and developing large energy infrastructure, and was really, other than my relationships with the coaches and with the players, really was separated from the entire enterprise, if you will. But I started following Andy Schwartz's work as the economist for the litigation in the O'Bannon case, and also in the Alston case, two cases that the plaintiffs eventually won against the NC2AA, and just became very intrigued with the level of detail and expertise that Andy seemed to have. And when he eventually got frustrated with the really slow progress that those cases were making and going through the appeal process, which we're still having to endure to this day, he tried to come up with the marketing answer or marketing solution, if you will, to this issue with college football and basketball players and economic rights, or basically civil rights, the rights that every student tends to enjoy, but the quote unquote student athlete doesn't get to enjoy if they're in the Division One sport. So I got to meet you, Ricky, and met Andy, and had the opportunity to recruit David on board. And this is just really a labor of love for me. It's something that I feel very strongly about, and look forward to seeing a equitable solution coming up soon. So that's my background in a nutshell.
And when you originally came on board, I distinctly remember where I was even when we had that first call, outside of the movie theater in Crocker Park. But, originally our plan with the
You're
HBL...
like, who the hell is this guy?
Yeah, our original plan with the HBCUs being involved directly, through the HBL's original model, obviously looks very different today. I know that that's something that both of us still find unfortunate in sort of the progress of the league, that we weren't able to include them in a more holistic way. But in general, your experiences, even at an institution like Stanford, where, supposedly academics are still held to the same standard for athletes as they are for non-athletes, how much does the current collegiate model compromise the academic and educational opportunities of athletes?
Significantly. Even at a place like Stanford, there are some exceptions where you can find athletes that are able to major in something that is quite challenging, like pre-med curriculum. But even then, when an athlete does do that, they usually have to take time off or take extra years to complete all the requirements that are necessary for that type of curriculum. And there are, I'll refrain from mentioning any specific majors, but there are definitely majors, even at a place like Stanford, that athletes are often steered to because they're less demanding and will better accommodate working, 40 or 50 or 60 hours even in season during the week, and can accommodate, the academic workload that a kid has to endure. It's very challenging, very, very demanding, not impossible, but it does exact a toll on these kids, and we expect them to be able to bear that, with grace and aplomb, and we get to look the other way while the model continues to take advantage of it.
Right. What's changed, Keith? What in your mind, just now that you've been outside of the collegiate system, and then you sort of had an opportunity to look back onto it. What ultimately have you seen that's changed, either for the good or the bad, to this point where you were in the '90s and where we are now in the 2020s?
Yeah, the only thing that I would point to that has changed is the money has just grown bigger and bigger, and so the exploitation is bigger, and it exacerbates the problem. Quite frankly, I think we have a tendency to demonize folks that are engaged in these programs, and you see staffs grow, you see facilities grow, but I do believe there is just a creep for people that are involved in these programs, where they're just blinded. They don't want to see, first of all, but they're blinded to the wrongs that we're and the pressure that we're putting on these individuals, and they think that they can just handle it. And when they do break down, it's just treated as a one-off event or an exception. So I think that's the biggest difference is that these sports have been allowed to grow, just without any accountability, and it's just exacerbated the problem, quite frankly. So that's the only difference that I see.
You mentioned obviously some elite athletes at Stanford that you worked with in your time there, and I know that you've also, through your fraternity affiliation and otherwise just your good naturedness, have mentored plenty of other elite athletes. But for those at an institution like Stanford, are they really getting the same sort of an opportunity as a non-athlete on the other side of that experience if they don't get to go to professional route?
Oh no, there's no way. But there is a plausible argument that they are still getting exposure to some really high level, high powered people in all fields of industry. So you do have that, but is it quote unquote your stereotypical college experience? No. There's absolutely no way that anyone can say that with a straight face. What the cost of that is really hard to measure. But do I look or know people that have gone to Stanford and have had a less than ideal experience? Yes. Is that because they were an athlete there? I don't know that I could actually say that, but you just have to make the most of what your experience is, and that's usually my advice for anybody that's considering going there or having the opportunity there. It's not so bad that I wouldn't recommend that somebody would go there, but they have to go in there clear-eyed and open with an open mind and understand that may not get the typical Stanford experience, if you will.
In the course of your mentoring with athletes, I know, right now we're going through sort of unprecedented times for college athletics as it relates to the pandemic, and also just the awareness of the societal issues, the social injustices, the systemic racism really that's built into college athletics as a result of the Black Lives Matters movement. What have you seen in terms of, and heard from athletes in terms of what they're currently experiencing? I think a lot of people don't realize how many football programs right now are currently practicing, or as of last week, 59 Division I basketball teams are now practicing. So in that context, what have you been hearing and understanding from the athletes and their personal and individualized experiences?
Lots and lots of frustration. There is resentment and distrust, and for a lot of these kids, for the first time, they are coming face to face with how they're being taken advantage of. And, this unfortunate situation with George Floyd just, painted a very stark picture for them in terms of receiving support from their coaches and their administrative staff and feeling out the most constructive and effective ways to respond to this. I've been in contact with a number of kids that just want to speak out and want to say something, and they're struggling with that, and they don't have any guys. It's trickling down to somebody like me, which is crazy because I'm so detached from these programs now and don't really have a good understanding of what they're going through and what they're experiencing. But at least I'm an ear, and I am empathetic to what they might be going through. And that is, that's not a real good reflection on these programs and being plugged in and really knowing what these kids are enduring and understanding these kids. And granted, it may be hard. This younger generation is a whole different world. I can speak firsthand from that with my children, but that doesn't mean that they don't lack for support or need support. And that's hard to see because it does, again, exact a mental toll and an emotional toll on these kids.
I know that obviously there's the physical health concerns around contracting the virus, but something else that you and I have talked about, given these sort of prolonged periods of isolation for these athletes, is also the mental health component. How concerned are you in speaking with these athletes for not only the possibility that they might experience a mental health crisis, but just even before we get to that point, the resources that are being offered to them, while they're literally being held in hotel rooms?
Yeah, I'm really concerned about that. They're isolated in these in these hotel rooms, the past few weeks or the past month or so. These kids are thrown into the sea, if you will, of an entirely different culture, and they don't know who to trust. They don't know where to turn to. They may have, hopefully, they have some peers that they can go to or turn to, or a circle of support. But yeah, it's obvious. The mainstream, the general audience is experiencing a lot of mental health or mental wellness issues. You can only imagine what these kids might be going through when they're having to deal with it, in complete isolation, separated from their family, separated from the support group that they may have known when they were growing up, and being under, a regime or a reign of authority that they may or may not be comfortable with. That's very concerning. And then you have, the administration throwing waivers at them, asking them to sign off on the quote unquote risks associated with COVID. You tell me what those risks are. I don't think anybody frankly knows what those risks are. So, there's just a lot of issues, and these are kids. They're young kids, and they're not completely mature or ready to deal, or readily equipped to deal with these types of issues. And it isn't right. And quite frankly, the hierarchy in college sports doesn't have the most credibility. The only time that they ever do anything for the benefit of these athletes, or the players, if you will, is when they're at the point of a bayonet and forced to do something. So they just don't have any credibility as far as I'm concerned.
What does justice look like for these guys? What does that look like?
Shoot, that's a great question, man. I might turn that one back over to you. I don't know. They first of all, they got to have representation that they have confidence in. Collective representation. I don't know. A lot of people are against the unions. I know, from when I was working at Stanford, the TAs, the teaching assistants had unions, the PhD students had unions, the workers at the hospitals had unions, the janitors and the cooks have had unions, but these players are employees, and I know they want to avoid that characterization at all costs. But even if they don't characterize them as employees, they should have some representation with somebody that has the skill set and the knowledge to be supportive and to look out for their interests. That doesn't exist right now. So that's one step. I think, and I was always a radical with regard to this. All of these coaches hated when I said this, but these kids have to feel empowered to speak their mind, whatever that is. Because that's what college is all about. And these kids are definitely squelched, if you will, or silenced. They are told no social media. Don't put this out here. Don't say this. If you do happen to have an interview with a media outlet, somebody is generally there. I don't think that's necessarily bad, but they definitely try to condition and shape the narrative. And I'm all for, athlete empowerment and kids being able to speak their minds. And, that's one of the best ways for them to learn, particularly at that stage in their young adult life. So those two things immediately come to mind.
Absolutely.
This very morning, the Big 12 announced that they're going to resume their media days, but for coaches only. The athletes are not going to be permitted to participate in the Big 12 media days yet, which again, I think goes to show the fear on these campuses and within these conferences of athletes speaking right now, and especially telling the real experience that they're going through, not whatever rosy picture the coaches are going to paint. for the media, and they're going to gobble it up. I mean, that's going
Good
back to
point.
representation. There's nobody that's really keeping these institutions in check or asking them the tough questions that need to be asked right now. It's
No accountability. Yeah.
Right. It's and the waivers, and we know this. I don't know that the public knows this, but Stanford is forcing waivers onto their athletes. Again, an institution that is supposedly about the overall holistic experience.
They're the model. They're the model. Top of the top, and they are up here forcing waivers on these kids.
Mm.
That's ridiculous. It's an abomination, man.
And a question for both of you, David, for you too. I know that people like to latch on to, well, is there any sort of explicit or else situation? Like, if you don't sign this waiver, then this happens to you.
Yeah.
But how much is the implicit side when your coaching staff says, sign this waiver? What's really being said then, if you don't sign it, you don't participate in voluntary workouts and you don't fall in line.
Right. Yeah, and that's definitely the case, right? They want the guys, and we've all heard about these guys getting back to campus, and basically they're guilt you into feeling like you have some responsibility to play and compete for the name on the front of the jersey, right? For the university's sake. And so we'll see a lot of these stories. Again, I just hope that the athletes, like you said, Keith, have opportunities if they want to speak up and want to speak out, have the opportunity to represent what they're trying to say in the right manner to the public.
Yeah. And you think about just the power, the division of power and control between a university and an 18, 19, 20-year-old kid. It's just, come on. And that kid has been dreaming about, playing for all his life. You may have a kid whose family is, dependent, rationally or not, on them successfully going through college and becoming a professional and supporting the family, and you're going to ask them to do something. Of course they're going to be or feel like they're coerced into doing something that may not be in their interest long term.
I think you hit on something there, Keith, that doesn't get talked about enough. It's not only the conditioning of the athletes, but it's the conditioning of the parents. That's, I know, been a critical component, or pro NCAA, pro institution sports media writers, and I'm not going to give them the benefit of sharing our platform by saying their names, but that have been very critical of athletes and parents and saying, if it was so bad, these parents would say something. But that's not the case. The way that parents are conditioned is if they speak out on behalf of their son, in this case because it's football, that they could also cost their son their dream, because especially in a sport like football where you've got 120 people on campus participating on this team, it's not like that. David could have probably said something at Xavier because there was no one else after David that's replacing him. But if you're, DB number 36 on Stanford football and you speak up and say something, there's 10 dudes waiting right behind you that are going to jump at that opportunity. So it's going back to the power dynamic and the conditioning, it's a very different culture and atmosphere that they can kind of beat these kids into submission and make them do what they want.
And that culture is uniquely promoted in football, especially football.
Yeah. So, well, Keith, we really appreciate you joining us. Glad we were finally able to bring you to our audience.
Yeah, the Echo Andy, it's about time. No.
Well, I'm sure this is only the first time. We'll definitely have you back. And again, appreciate you.
Well, thank you guys. Appreciate it. Appreciate the work that you're doing. It's an honor to be working with you guys, man.
Thanks, Keith. Appreciate it, man.
All right. Take care.
And welcome back to Forward Thinking. Ricky Vellante, joined by my co-host, David West. We have another special guest joining us this afternoon, writer of Black-ish and creator of Mixed-ish, Peter Saji. Saji, thanks for joining us.
Of course, man. Thanks for having me.
Also, he's an advisory board of the PCL. I should mention that. So, Saji, we usually like to introduce our guests with just letting them tell us a a little bit about your background so that our audience can get familiar with you.
Yeah, I been writing for a long time. I wrote on Cultivating before Black-ish, and then co-created Mixed-ish with Kenya Barris and Tracy Ellis Ross. I was telling Ricky earlier, my lady is a much better person than I am. So she adopted twins and then fostered 4 kids right before this pandemic. So we got 6 kids that we're dealing with right now. But she is constantly sort of inspiring me to try to be a better person, and that's one of the things that sort of I loved about this initiative. Ricky sort of told me about it, Mecca told me about it. Like, it was an opportunity to sort of like create parity for people that deserve it, And so I love the mission, and was down to try to help out.
We appreciate you being a part of it. So you've done a couple of different, I would say, in terms of the larger cable outlets and broadcast stations, 2 of the most diverse shows that are out there. How important is that representation element to these projects, and what drew you to them? And then getting Mixed-ish started and taking a little bit different spin on the family dynamics. Again, what drew you to that side of it as well?
Yeah, so it was interesting because, I got a scholarship to this boarding school that I went to, and so from basically 13 until Black-ish, I was the only Black person in the room. You know what I mean? And so it's like basically every classroom, every like lecture in college, every gig that I had, like working on Cougar Town and stuff like that. And so it was normal for me to just sort of feel like Jackie Robinson like all the time. You know what I mean? It's just like, okay, like there's going to be some messed up stuff that's going to happen to you, and you just you don't get too mad. You just sort of say the chorus because there's people coming behind you and all that sort of. And that was the mentality I had. And then also, like, I was raised to sort of think that HBCUs were not necessary, right? Because it was like, you're going to be the only Black person in the room, so get used to it now versus not getting giving a false sense of how the world is going to be. And so then I was reading Ta-Nehisi Coates' book, Between the World and Me, when he talked about the Mecca, talked about Howard and just what it meant to him. I felt left out. You know what I mean? I was like, oh, I've been given like a false bill of goods, right? I've been told like this thing, and what it seems like, in all of my friends that went through it were taught an idea of creating their own path as opposed to figuring out how to fit in the system that already exists. You know what I mean? And so I think I was kind of sort of taught and encouraged to figure out how I fit in versus accepting that I will never fit in. So to create a thing that's going to be the best possible fit for me. And so Black-ish ended up becoming like kind of like my HBCU experience, because like the first season of Black-ish, everyone there was used to being that one person doing. So it was like the women were the only women in a room. That Indian guy was like the only Indian. Like, so all of us were like these marginalized groups. And that was by design. Like, Kenya was like looking for those types of people that were hungry. And if you look, like Black-ish, before us, the last, I think, network Black sitcom was, I think, My Wife and Kids. So it'd been a long time. Like, we came before Empire even. Like, so the explosion of diversity happened after Black-ish. And so it was a thing when we're all there, like, we have no idea if this is going to work. You know what I mean? And we're sitting around a table just kind of like telling these stories. But then for the first time feeling like our value and our actual identity had more value than just like someone ticking off a box saying, okay, we got our one, whatever. You know what I mean? And then us trying to just figure out how to make ourselves small and like unoffensive to people so that we can fit in this system that had been sort of created for us. And so, Black-ish exploded. And then afterwards that like people, other networks and things started having more diverse programming and stuff. And one of the things I'm most proud of, 2 things I'm most proud of, is that I wrote the Juneteenth episode of Black-ish, and I wrote the Prince episode of Black-ish. And the Juneteenth episode, Tim Cook said that he saw that episode and then put Juneteenth in the iCal. And so all of this knowledge of Juneteenth that's happened, it's a direct line to that episode. And that's just something that, it was something that was important to us. And it was, we saw Hamilton, we loved Hamilton and wanted to pay homage to Hamilton. and create sort of a musical about Black experience in America. And I was like, okay, well, here's this subject matter that people don't really know about. And it should be like I'm not one of the people that thinks we shouldn't celebrate 4th of July, but I think we should celebrate 4th of July and Juneteenth, because Juneteenth is the actual day where everyone had independence, not just a very specific group of people, right? And so it was like that. We just started out with that idea, and it was this pipe dream. And then banks closed early this Juneteenth. It was crazy to see. Like I was like, I did not think that was going to happen in my lifetime, right? And so like the value of diversity, like I've seen it happen in like 6 years. You know what I mean? Like in a very short period of time, it's just like the opportunity to tell those stories matters, right? And it gave me personally improved feelings of self-worth. And so I'm hoping that kids watching the show like have that same sort of feeling where they're like, oh, you know what? I'm gonna blaze my own path and not try to fit in the same way. Like my diversity, my identity is something to be proud of, and is something of value that I can share with the world. So yeah, I mean, there's a long way of saying that I'm an actual testament of how it's benefited, people and how it's valuable to me personally.
Right, right. When did you start writing? For some of our younger listeners, our young athletes or whatever, always try to get some, some personal perspective or from some professional perspective. So what point did you start writing?
Yeah. So I got the principal's writing award in first grade, right?
Okay.
So it was a thing that I guess I took to at a young age, but like as far as it being a thing that could pay bills, it never that felt like a pipe dream, because I grew up on the East Coast, like basically in Maryland, and so like Hollywood was like not a real thing. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's like, you know what I'm saying? So it was like, okay, I'm good at this thing, but who knows, right? And so, I started making like some short films and stuff like that, like friends and stuff. And people were like, oh, you're good at this, but it still didn't feel like a real thing, And then again, like, that's just on the East Coast, that's just not what people are doing, right? They're going to like, either they're playing it safe generally, that people get married younger out there. Like everyone has a very sort of like cookie cutter kind of way that they're supposed to do things. And so I I used to be a semi-professional b-boy breakdancer, right? Like so basically I got paid sometimes, right? And so I was like the weakest one of my crew, but like my crew in the DMV was like one of the best, if not the best crew in that area. It's called Lions Design. And so I started this event. It was an MC DJ b-boy battle, right? And so Pharrell ended up judging it for me. And then we got some like real world and some road rules people to judge it as well. And then that got sponsors involved. So we got like Puma and Red Bull and Coke and like the 555 Soul, like this.
Right.
You know what I mean? And so we, and then NPR did like a little thing on us. And so that was like my first kind of like thing I tried to do that like create a little bit of noise, right?
Okay.
And so I was hanging out with all these b-boys all the time. And, I'm 6'4". I had no business trying to do this. You know what I mean? Like, it's just not like my body's not built for it, right? So I'm like training with them, trying to get good at it. And I'm realizing that there wasn't a path for b-boys, right? There's not like we're going to do this and then we're going to go like have a career.
Right.
They were pouring all their heart and soul into their art, right? And I was looking at them like, well, damn, at least there's what I'm trying to do. There's a thing, even as crazy as it might be, there's a thing out there. There is hot. So it felt like I owed it to myself to at least take a swim, And so I had a 2000 Honda Civic hatchback. It was the lowest Honda that Honda manufactured that year. It was the CX. It had manual, like roll up windows. Like the air conditioning was an option. Like I actually I tried to not have AC. You know what I mean? Because I was like, it was like, and so I drove, in DC this summer. I drove around one day. I was like, no, I gotta have AC. So I went back and put it in it. But I filled that car with like my computer and aero bed and my clothes, and I drove out to LA.
Wow.
And then just basically beat on doors until I got a job answering phones. But I had learned how to edit from like the short films that I've been doing. I learned how to edit on Final Cut. I didn't know that that was like an actual trade out here. I was like, we were producing EPKs, like electronic press kits, like behind the scenes stuff for movies and all that kind of thing. And so he was just like, oh, I'm outsourcing this to editors. If you can edit it. So he bought a setup, put it there. And so I'm editing that. And now I'm getting like associate producer credits on some of the things that he's doing. And then I'm writing. I got the Reed family. Robbie Reed is a big casting director right here. Like I sort of fell into them as like surrogate family. And so like when I couldn't afford to go home for holidays, I'd be at their house and stuff. And Duran, a really good friend of mine, he had a friend at Activision that was looking for writers for a video game. And so he was like, I know you've been writing. So I wrote a video game and I got paid what felt like a lot of money, but it was $2,500. Which now I know that they completely ripped me off. But like at the time it was just like, oh my God, now I'm a paid writer, right? Like I'm actually getting paid to do this. Because then it was just like little things like that really just tell you that you deserve to be here. Because like that, I used to live in $2,000 increments. Like that's how it was for me back then. It was like, that was my rent, my insurance, gas, food, like all that. So like when the $2,500 was like, oh, I just got a month of living plus the extra.
Right.
Looked at everything like that. But like that confidence was to keep going out there. And so, I just kept banging on doors, giving people scripts, getting notes that people like, maybe find a more talented writer to write this, And so just getting crazy rejection until finally, when you write that material that works for you, right? What I mean is like, I didn't have to keep asking people to read it. Like when I finally wrote that script, people go, oh, do you want me to give this to my whoever? Do you mean they start volunteering it for it? And it's like, oh, I finally wrote that script that wasn't garbage. You know what I mean? And it was like, and once that happened, like the script works for you. Like you write it and people are like they want to give it to someone, right? They want to show it. So I had a friend who basically went to college with someone that was an assistant at a big agency, and he gave it to his boss, and I got an agent out of it. From my friend reading, oh, can I give this to whoever? And so that was my first agent. Got my first gig on the critically acclaimed smash hit Caveman. You remember that show? It was like the Geico commercials.
Yeah.
So I did that, and then and that was it. That was I was so green that was just so exciting to me. And also just when the whole world hates you, it brings you all closer together. It's like that we were like in the bunker together, like really felt close. And but then the strike happened, it killed that show, and then it was like almost I had to start over, because like when you have a bunch of other experience and Caveman, it's fun, right? But when you only have Caveman, it's not funny. They're like, oh, your one show is roundly celebrated as the worst sitcom in history. Like, it's hard to get another gig after that. So, then it was back to the grind again, writing pilots and giving it to my agent, and then over and over again, taking meetings, almost getting a gig, not getting it, trying to figure out what I did wrong, making adjustments, and then just keep doing that until then. That was Cougar Town, and I was there for 5 years, and then I just met with Kenny on the show, and he liked the script that I'd written, and he liked sort of my point of view, and took a chance on me, and glad he did because it changed my life.
And so now you're on the other side of it. Again, co-creator now of Mixed-ish. You really are the one, putting the key elements together of what is another major series. How is the difference there, and how have you felt empowered to sort of go to bat for your vision of your own project now?
Yeah. I mean, it's a little bit. There's some of both, right? Because like Kenya definitely empowered us to sort of see our episodes all the way through. Do you know what I mean? Just like, and that was the expectation as well, right? Of just like getting there, and it's like, oh no, like you're on set making the decisions, all that, and post everything. So there was a little bit of that sort of already existed as I came over to Mixed-ish, But then now it's a totally different kind of experience because this is now through my point of view. Do you know what I'm saying? As opposed to when you're writing for someone else, like for Kenya, it's like I'm trying to write in Kenya's voice, and I'm trying to like what he wants to do. It's my job to help him do that. right? Like if it's like, oh, I want to go in this direction, he's like, no, I want to go in this direction. Well, that's the direction we're going in. They're like, when I get my own show, we can go in that direction. You know what I'm saying? And so now it's like, it's interesting because like we were working on something right before this. We're doing everything in Zoom right now, and I could hear people sort of saying, "Well, I know you like this." And I was like, "Oh shit, people are trying to go in the direction I want now." It's like a different feeling, you know. But then you're like, "Well, shit, is the direction I want to go? Is it the right one?" I don't know. You know, and so that it opens up a whole new can of worms when it comes to insecurity and stuff like that. But it's been great, you know, and this isn't, you know, obviously purely my vision because, you know, it's a character that sort of already existed. It's a spinoff and stuff like that. And so we're still anchored to the world, you know, and so there still is a respect for the Kenya Barris vision, the Kenya Barris world, Kenya Barris voice, because it's not like I can just go like, oh, this is totally mine now, right? But at the same time, it's like the mixed perspective is unique to me, right? Well, I'm relative to Kenya, not like I'm the only mixed person in the world, you know what I'm saying? But like, so, you know, that to be able to see things through that is a different lens, you know what I'm saying? And so that's the thing that, me and the other, you know, mixed writers on the staff are doing to sort of like tell that story and tell the experiences that we've had.
Were there any sort of like flagpole, you know, really making it your sort of choices in that initial process of getting this production and this series spun off where, you know, you really went to bat and were able to get a certain thing that you wanted in place?
Yeah, I think for me, it happened. We did a hair episode last season. I think it was maybe episode 3 or whatever. It's called "Let Your Hair Down," and I wrote that with Karen Gist, who was a showrunner last year, and super talented writer. And we like that. There was a lot of cooks in the kitchen at the beginning. You know, there's just like a lot of shows, and then on top of that, we had a very abbreviated development process, you know, because since that was an episode of Black-ish, we didn't get all the months that most people get when they're writing pilots to develop all the characters and all that sort of stuff. It was like we did what most people have months to do. We did basically in like 10 days, right? So it was like, so all that character development and everything was a little bit shorthanded. And so where I think normally you come into a pilot process and everybody's on the same page as to who everybody is and what they want, I think people had different ideas of what the show was going to be. And then on top of that, it was like the merger was happening with 20th and ABC. And so there's a lot of anxiety happening there. And I think we were the only comedy that they picked up. So like everyone is just, there's a lot of nervous energy, a lot of cooks in the kitchen, a lot of people wanting this to work really well. So it was chaos. Right? And so things were getting pulled in different directions. And then that was an opportunity where I was just like, okay, this is a trick. Like talking about black hair is a loaded conversation. You know what I'm saying? And we hadn't done that yet on Black-ish, but then also I was the one that wrote the colorism episode on Black-ish. And so to me, complexion is trickier than hair is. Do you know what I mean? And so when people are like, hair is crazy, I was like, I know it is, but I think I already did the crazy one. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. And so I was like, I'm not scared of hair right now. And I think this is the thing too that'll help us pull everyone together because it allows all these different points of view. It allows white people to maybe not understand it, try and understand it. Black people to have this perspective, mixed people to have a similar but slightly nuanced perspective. And it just like, it'll show how our family is different, but unique, but universal. You know what I'm saying? Like all in one moment. And so it was like, okay, I think we need to do this. Karen was with it. And so we, went through and it just sort of laid out well. And so when we wrote that episode, it relaxed everybody, you know? And I think it was like that moment where people were like, oh, I see what this show is now. I see who these characters are. And so that was something I was really proud of. I was hoping it was going to get nominated for an Emmy. It did not. But, I got none of those for episodes. But no, it was still, we got an Image Award nomination, actually. That was really, really cool. And so, yeah, seeing how people responded to it, like in a sort of similar way that they responded to the colorism episode, was triumph for me personally, because I know that I love taking big swings on things. and telling stories that are tricky to tell, and in hopes that can sort of the conversation can provide healing. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
Because and that's what, like, when people tell me like what the colorism episode meant to me, what to them, or what the hair episode meant to them, that to me is like, okay, like that's what makes this all worth it. Do you know what I mean? Because it's like, okay, like we told our truth and it came back as truth. Do you know what I mean? Like, and obviously nothing's perfect. No, like it's not like 100% of people like, yo, it's dope. Mm-hmm. Just the fact that it seems like in general the community responds to it and respects it, then that for me is the big one.
Right. How important is cultivating a creative process? So I know you have a way that you go about, coming up with ideas and getting your ideas down without going into specifically what you do. If there's a young creative out there somewhere, how important is it for you to create a process and then cultivate sort of your own creative idea through that process?
Yeah, well, for me, I think it's more about habit than process, right? But if your process is habit, then that's beautiful too. Do you know what I mean? But like, I think you can get caught up in like, like I gotta have my incense or whatever it is, right? but like if you're on a plane somewhere and you don't have your incense or whatever, then it's like, what are you gonna do, right? Like you gotta get it done. But if it's just like, okay, every day I write however many minutes a day, do you know what I'm saying? And it's just like, it's time to do it. And some people think it should be the exact same time every day, so it becomes like Pavlovian. It's like time to write. Right? Right. And I think I'm not at that place, but I think it'd be helpful. And that's actually one of my kids. She's actually displayed interest in writing, the oldest one, and so I want to get her on that path. It's just like, she's good, but it's just like, we got to do it every day, because you're good now, but if you want to get actually like career good, you got to put the work in. Do you know what I mean? And so like, she's like, well, I just wrote a little bit. We were talking yesterday. She's like, I only wrote a little bit today. I was like, a little bit's good, but now tomorrow we're gonna write a little bit more, and so I think just like making sure that you're doing it every day, or at least 5 days a week. That I think is more important than like what the process is. You know what I mean? Because it's getting acclimated to like wherever I am. You know what I mean? Like a crowded subway, whatever. Like if it's time to work, it's time to work. And when you have that down, I think it's probably going to be better than like trying to like have your like
your mood, right? Set your mood.
Exactly, because then that's just stuff you got to carry in your back. The laptop's heavy enough in your back. You need all the candles on top.
Right.
And so when it comes to writing scripts, I don't think a lot of people know this, but writing a script is a very different thing from just writing. Mm-hmm. And so what was that process like, to go from being a good writer in the first grade to writing scripts for projects that will hopefully be bought?
Yeah. So, I mean, the first step, which is crazy, is you have to unlearn everything. Right. And so like what they tell you when you're younger is show, don't tell. Right. So you don't say, hey, it was wet outside. You describe the moisture and how it makes you feel and all that kind of thing. Right. But then the issue when you get to a screenplay is the director does that, right? So if you start describing like what they're wearing and all this, he's like, well, I don't know that I want them in a red shirt. What are you doing? You know what I mean? And so you have to leave all of that for them to do. And so you're only telling what everyone says and what they're doing as long as it propels the story forward, right? So if someone is eating a bagel, that doesn't matter, right? But if they're eating a bagel because it's the last one and they don't want someone to know that it's the last one, then that moves the story forward. You know what I'm saying? And so, but like as far as just like, oh, I was eating a bagel and the crumbs were falling on my chin, that's beautiful, but like that's for the director. And so like if you do too much of that, like they won't like the script. They'll be like, well, who do you think? And like you're like, oh, I got the music I want playing for the like you don't know if they can license that song. You don't know if that's like the song the director has in mind for that sequence. Like you can make suggestions. Like that's what I do sometimes. It's like a song like this, so you have an idea of what I'm thinking about, but I'm not trying to step on your toes with what you're like in television is a different beast because the writer is sort of in charge of television. But when you're thinking about features, the director's in charge. And so you're really just like, these are suggestions, take them away. and so you're writing down what everybody says and what they're doing as it moves the story, as it's important to the story, And so it takes a little bit of undoing because you're so used to using this flowery language to like help paint a picture. And there's room for that, where you can sometimes trick readers into thinking your script is better than it is. Because like that's what happens sometimes when you're reading a script is you're like, oh, this language is great. Okay, but what am I going to see? They're not going to know that. So we got to cut all that out, right? And so a good script is really just kind of bones of just like it's a skeleton. And then all the flesh and the skin that gets put on it, that's by your art department, your music department, your director, and all that.
Wow.
And to your point, to hit something home there, it's drastically different on a feature versus a series, where in a series you're going to be working with a bunch of different directors over the course of a season, especially on something that's on cable broadcast where you're dealing with 20 plus episodes.
Exactly. Because the issue is that the director is a hired gun that may do a couple of your episodes, but then they're going to do a couple of something else. So they're not there all the way through. So they don't necessarily know that in episode 18, we're doing this other thing. Do you know what I mean? And so it's up to the writer to be on stage to be like, no, this isn't like Kenya wants this. So therefore we need to be doing this now. So you know what I'm saying? Because we're in there every day and we're seeing the big picture, whereas they're just seeing the episode that they're doing. Do you know what I mean? And so that's why it's like, it's up to us to make sure the story, and sometimes you have producing directors who are there for the whole time, and then it's their job to actually help with that. You know what I mean? But if you're just having like an episodic director, then they're not seeing a big picture because they only see the script that they've read. You know what I mean? So that they're not at liberty to have knowledge of the whole season. Whereas with a feature, that's the whole thing is theirs. Do you know what I mean? And so, they'll even a lot of times do rewrites and stuff like that. Like writers, we're not even like invited to set, I don't think, for like features and stuff like that. Or like we have to be invited. It's not like we can just show up.
Wow.
So,
right.
It's a totally different thing.
And now we're in the middle of a pandemic. For those that may not have noticed, you are preparing for production at some point of the second season for Mixed Dish. What are some of obviously there's the obvious physical distancing challenges, but what are you all dealing with right now to prepare for this next season?
So right now we're writing, and so we're doing that all just like this in Zoom, and it's a lot better than I thought it would be. Honestly, I thought I was going to hate it because it's like, especially with comedy, it's so much a vibe, like being in the room, doing bits, joking with people, all that kind of thing. And the type of stories that the Black-ish universe does are very personal stories that like involve you to really sort of tell almost like your secrets. Do you know what I'm saying? Because it's like that's where our stories kind of come from, like the underbelly of the things we were feeling about whatever. And we had a lot of turnover this year with the staff, and so I was nervous about, are people going to feel comfortable doing that with strangers that you only know in these boxes? You know what I mean? But to their credit, like everyone's dope. You know what I mean? Like everyone's like being honest, like telling their truth and all that. And then the stories are coming along well. The jokes are fun. We're like getting work done. It's efficient. And so, so that part we have locked down. As far as the production part, that's just an ongoing conversation because we just keep getting more information about how the virus works, And so, so it's like, we're talking to the unions to figure out what's going to be safe for people, and then it'll be a conversation with the actors of what do they feel safe with, and then it's like the actual logistics of like how many people can be there, because you look at a TV show and you see 3 people on screen. What you don't see is the 200 people that are like just standing off screen to do hair, to do makeup, to do the lights, to do so there's a lot of people in a close quarter to make it work. And we're trying to figure all that out right now, And so, who's the most essential, to this, and how we can rush some people in and then out, to do it quickly. And so that's all the kind of stuff and then how can we write the stories that keep people as separated as possible, so that allows for more safety. So these are we're doing all of the above. It's tricky for sure, but I think comedy, I think we're gonna have an easier shot at it than a lot of drama as well, because it like jokes can be done from further away, so that's the thing that gives us hope for sure.
And forward looking, are there any concerns for you if you guys show a pared down, sort of stripped down version on the cost side of doing a production, how studios may start to look and say, well, wait a minute, can't we just make this the normal?
Yeah, no, I mean, that's always the fear, right? Because it's just like, it's like having this crew and stuff like that is a paternal feeling, right? It's just like, these people are eating because of this gig, right? And so you want to make sure that like you're not like an auditor, basically, like showing the studio how they can cut costs, So that's definitely a concern, right? And then just how it looks, we're hoping it's going to look different for sure. Like any TV produced this year is going to look different, and hopefully the audiences understand that like it's COVID, guys. We're even thinking about putting a chyron on it, like a lower third that says like it's COVID, guys. Like figuring out ways to do things. It's like bear with us. We're trying to keep everybody safe, but also give people something to do while they stay safe at home, right? And so, like the more we can incentivize people to be careful, right? That's one victory, right? That's the hope.
Right.
And not to make your job harder, but the period element that you're dealing with,
right?
In a present day comedy, you can kind of, it becomes a running joke then, whereas you might have some additional challenges.
No, exactly. So like, it might be one of those things where it's just, they'll just have to deal with people wearing masks in the deep background, and it is what it is. But like, it definitely won't fit the time period. We'll try to figure out ways to make it, like maybe turtlenecks just go up a little higher or something like that. You know what I mean? Just try to like, yeah, it's just an ongoing, like a lot of hoodies, zip all the way up, like with a mush mouth, and so yeah, it'll be that kind of thing. But yeah, it's part of it is fun because just as TV writers, we love trying to fix problems, But then the stakes are much higher than they normally are, right? Like if something doesn't work normally, it's just like people get upset. So that's the part that's a little nerve wracking, but it's everybody wants the same thing. We want this to work, but we want to stay safe. So that's the good news. We're all on the same page.
So my last thing, mostly just to commend you more so than to really ask a question, but during the BET Awards, you stepping up to defend Marsai Martin. Just wanted to commend you on that, because man, people really suck on the internet sometimes.
It's like, come on, man, this is like a 15-year-old girl. Like, what are we doing? But that's family. Like, we've known her since she was really young, since season 1, and I just love what she's been able to do, like executive producing movies and stuff like that. And she's so talented. And just like she's in some of my favorite episodes, like the Colorism episode and the Prince episode, she's had really strong moments in them. Like with her Purple Rain solo and the Prince episode was just inspired, right? And she wasn't even alive when like Prince was doing that stuff. So it's just like she figured that out on YouTube, I guess, or something, and then like the poignance she brought to the Colorism episode. So I just personally I'm a big fan of her. So people being mean, and that brings out my Papa Bear instincts. Like, what are we doing? Like, just drop a pin. Let me know.
Right. But that's what the success of something like Black-ish does is, Marsai being 15, who we're going to see her continue to be empowered throughout her whole career, and then in turn empower other people.
For sure. Definitely. Like she's she's the future of Hollywood right there. Right? Like it's just, she's got vision and she's got talent, and so and then confidence, right? And those two things together are just unstoppable, and so at this stage of her life to already be doing these types of things, like like when I was 15, what was I doing? I wasn't doing anything. I was doing nothing of note whatsoever.
Right.
So that's beautiful.
My last question, and man, we appreciate your time so much. Just a little offshoot question, but I just want to know for our listeners, man, what's the first thing you do in the morning when you wake up? What is? I'm a big routine guy. I believe in sort of starting your day the right way, ending your day a certain way. What's your morning thing that sort of gets you as a creative person, someone who needs the creative juices flowing on a consistent basis? What do you do to get your day going?
The first thing I do, I read it was like a meme or something like that. It was like 11 things that highly successful people do, and one of the things that stuck with me was making your bed. You know what I mean? And so like the first thing I do is, assuming I'm the last one up, I make my bed. Because like I think what it does psychologically is it's a little thing that it feels like I did something. Do you know what I mean? Like before you're fully awake, it's like, oh, I made the bed. Do you know what I mean?
Right.
The list. Do you know what it feels like it's an easy accomplishment that feels like a win. And then when I come in the room looks that much cleaner because the bed's moved. Do you know what I'm saying?
Right.
And so I think it does that too. It helps me because I think like if my desk's not organized and stuff like that, like it's harder for me to focus. You know what I mean? And so I think it clears my mind a little bit, and it makes me feel like I did something before I'm even like all the way awake. And so just like the day with like, oh, I did something. You know what I mean? And then the next thing I do is I work out. And so then that actually really like that's almost like physical meditation for me. Like that clears my head, and then that's two things, right? I got my workout done, I got my bed made, and then it's like right now I can just chill.
Right. Good deal. I appreciate that, man. Not for real.
Yeah. You guys, like this has been great. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Appreciate me making me feel important.
Yeah, no, this is great, Saji. We really appreciate the time, and I know our audience is going to appreciate it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, man. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, stay safe.
All right, you too.
Thank you for listening to the latest episode of Forward Thinking, presented by the Professional Collegiate League. We hope you enjoyed hearing from Keith and Saji. Forward Thinking is co-hosted by David West and Ricky Vellante, produced by Rafa Hernandez Brito, Wendell Haskins, and Ricky Vellante, with the music done by David West. If you haven't already, be sure to like and subscribe Forward Thinking on your favorite podcast platform and the PCL YouTube channel. You can also get more information at thepcleague.com/forwardthinking. See you next week, and stay safe.